Emma had always loved the quiet of her small Portland apartment. The soft hum of the city outside her window felt like company on nights when she couldn't sleep. But that night was different. She woke up suddenly, heart pounding, lungs refusing to pull in air. For a second, she didn't understand what was happening. Then panic set in. Her chest felt tight, her hands shook, and her thoughts scattered like broken glass. She tried to breathe, but each breath came shallow and quick. It felt like the walls were closing in. The clock glowed past midnight. Her apartment was silent except for the faint ticking sound that seemed louder with every second. Emma sat up, clutching her chest, trying to calm herself, but her heart kept racing faster. She opened a window for air, but even the cold night breeze didn't help. She whispered to herself, "It's okay. It's okay." But it wasn't. Her mind raced between calling an ambulance or anyone who could help. Then she remembered her neighbor, Daniel, had moved in 2 weeks ago. They had exchanged polite smiles in the hallway, a few casual greetings, nothing more. But he had a calm presence, the kind that made you feel safe without a word. Desperate, she grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and called his number. Her voice cracked when he answered. "Daniel," she gasped, I can't breathe properly. I don't know what to do." He didn't hesitate. "Stay where you are," he said, his tone steady and firm. "I'm coming right now." Within minutes, there was a knock at her door. The sound startled her, but she rushed to open it. There he stood barefoot, wearing a gray sweatshirt and concern written all over his face. He didn't waste time asking questions. "Sit down," he said softly, guiding her toward the couch. His calmness felt like an anchor in a storm. Emma obeyed, still gasping, her hands cold. "I can't. My chest," she started, but he gently interrupted. "You're having a panic attack. It's okay, Emma. You're safe. Just focus on my voice." He knelt beside her, keeping his tone low and slow. "Breathe in with me. 1, 2, 3. Now exhale. Again, just follow me." She tried to match his rhythm. At first it felt impossible, but his voice didn't waver. He kept counting, calm and patient, as if nothing in the world could rush him. Slowly her heartbeat began to ease. The air started to return bit by bit. The tightness in her chest loosened. When she finally took a deep, steady breath, tears filled her eyes. The fear, the relief, the exhaustion, all of it poured out. Daniel handed her a glass of water he'd poured from her kitchen without asking, as if he already knew where to find things. "Here," he said gently. "Small sips." She drank, her hands still trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You don't need to thank me. You just needed someone tonight. That's all." They sat in silence for a few moments. The only sound was the soft rain beginning to fall outside. Emma looked around her living room, the same space that had felt so empty minutes ago, now filled with warmth. Daniel's presence was quiet but steady. It's the kind that made you feel you could breathe again, not just physically, but emotionally. After a few minutes, he asked softly, "Do you live here alone?" She nodded. "Most of my friends are across town. I didn't want to bother anyone." "You did the right thing," he said simply. "Sometimes asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." She looked at him, noticing for the first time how kind his eyes were. Not pitying, not judging, just kind. He moved to the kitchen, found a tea box, and filled a cup with hot water. "Chamomile," he said, reading the label. "Good choice." She almost laughed through her tears. He handed her the cup carefully. "Drink this. You'll feel better." Emma took a sip, and warmth spread through her chest. The room felt softer now, her breathing even. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, sitting across from her. "But I couldn't have slept knowing someone next door was struggling." The way he said it made her heart twist slightly, not out of romance, but out of something deeper, something like gratitude mixed with comfort. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just being decent, kind, human. After a few minutes, her mind began to clear. The panic that had consumed her earlier now seemed far away. She realized how close she had been to losing control. And how his steady voice had brought her back. I think I scared myself, she admitted softly. He smiled. It happens. Sometimes our minds just forget how strong we are. Emma studied him for a moment, wondering how someone she barely knew could feel so familiar already. Maybe it was the way he didn't rush her or the calm energy he carried. Whatever it was that night, she felt something shift inside her. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows in a soft rhythm. Daniel stood to leave, but paused at the door. "If you ever feel like that again," he said, "just knock on my door, okay? Don't wait until it gets bad." She nodded, words caught in her throat. "I will. Thank you again." "Really?" He gave a small nod, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good night, Emma." When the door closed behind him, Emma sat back on her couch, the quiet returning, but it wasn't the same quiet anymore. It felt lighter, safer. She sipped the rest of her tea, thinking about how someone could walk into your life in a single moment and somehow make it feel less lonely. She walked to the window and watched the rain. The city lights reflected in the puddles below, blurring softly, just like her thoughts. The fear that had gripped her earlier had faded into something else, something gentler, something almost peaceful. That night, before going back to bed, she left the lamp on. Not because she was afraid anymore, but because she didn't want the moment to end completely. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone as she lay in bed. Her last thought before sleep was of Daniel, his calm voice, his steady eyes, the warmth in his words. She didn't know it yet, but that night wasn't just the night she learned to breathe again. It was the beginning of something unexpected, something that would change both of their lives in quiet, beautiful ways. And as the rain whispered outside her window, Emma finally drifted to sleep. Her breathing slow and peaceful, her heart strangely full. The next morning, Emma woke up with sunlight spilling across her bed and the faint memory of last night still vivid in her mind. The fear, the panic, and then Daniel's calm voice guiding her through it all. She sat up slowly, half embarrassed and half thankful. It felt strange knowing that someone had seen her so vulnerable, but it also felt comforting. For the first time in months, she hadn't felt completely alone. She made herself coffee and stood by the window, watching the street below. The world seemed softer that morning, quieter, almost peaceful. She wondered if Daniel was awake, maybe getting ready for work. They had only known each other in passing before last night. But now it felt like there was a small, invisible thread connecting them. She thought about knocking on his door to thank him properly, but she hesitated. What if it felt awkward? What if he didn't think much of it? As she turned to walk away, there was a soft knock on her door. Her heart skipped. She opened it, and there he was holding a paper bag with 2 coffee cups inside. "I figured you might need some caffeine after last night," he said with an easy smile. Emma blinked, surprised but touched. "You didn't have to, I know." He interrupted gently, "But I wanted to check if you were okay." She stepped aside and let him in. He handed her a cup. "Vanilla latte, right? I saw the box of pods in your kitchen." He said it casually, but it made her laugh. "You really pay attention, don't you?" She teased. "I try," he said simply, sitting down at her small dining table. They talked more easily than she expected. She learned that Daniel was a photographer who had just moved from Seattle after ending a long relationship. He had wanted a new start, somewhere quieter, somewhere he could breathe again, as he put it. The irony of that didn't escape either of them, and they both laughed softly when he said it. Emma told him she worked remotely as a marketing consultant, mostly from home, which often made her days feel repetitive and quiet. "I guess I got too used to being alone," she admitted. "Sometimes I think I forgot how to let people in." Daniel listened, nodding without judgment. "We all forget that sometimes," he said. "But life has a funny way of reminding us." The simplicity of his words struck her. There was something about Daniel's way of speaking, gentle, grounded, like he wasn't trying to fill silence, but rather give it meaning. They finished their coffee, and he stood up to leave. "Try to take it easy today," he said at the door. "And if you ever feel that panic again, remember you've done it once. You can do it again." He smiled before walking away. Leaving her with a strange lightness in her chest. Over the next few days, Emma began noticing small things. A sticky note left on her door with the words, "Breathe. You're doing great." Small potted plant left outside her apartment with a note, "For your window. A little green helps." Each gesture was quiet, but meaningful. She didn't know if he was doing it to be kind or if there was something more. But either way, it made her smile every time. One evening, she decided to return the kindness. She baked a small batch of cookies and knocked on his door. When he opened it, he looked surprised but happy. "For you," she said, holding the plate awkwardly. "To say thank you for the notes and everything." He grinned, stepping aside. "Come in. You're saving me from another sad dinner of cereal." His apartment looked similar to hers, but with photographs everywhere, landscapes. City streets, people caught in quiet moments. She walked around admiring the shots. "These are beautiful," she said. "Thanks," he replied. "They're pieces of places I've lived. I think pictures help me remember how to see beauty in ordinary things." She turned to him and said softly, "You seem like someone who notices the small things everyone else overlooks." He shrugged, smiling slightly. "Maybe because small things are what save us sometimes." They sat down, eating cookies and talking like old friends. The conversation flowed naturally from their favorite movies to childhood memories to how both of them had quietly been searching for peace in their own ways. The evening stretched longer than either expected. At one point, the lights flickered as rain began to fall outside. Emma walked to the window. "I love the sound of rain," she said, her voice low. Daniel joined her, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth beside her. "Me too," he said. "It's the only sound that makes silence feel alive." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain hit the glass softly, and the city lights blurred into a soft glow. There was no rush, no tension, just two people standing quietly, sharing the kind of peace that didn't need words. Later that night, back in her apartment, Emma couldn't stop thinking about how easy it felt to be around him. Not exciting in the wild, unpredictable way, but in the safe, steady way that makes you feel seen. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed that kind of presence. The next morning, she woke to another note under her door. It said, "If today gets heavy, remember how you breathed through it last time? You've got this." She smiled and taped it on her fridge. Days passed, and their small exchanges became routine: shared coffee, quick hallway chats, friendly texts. But beneath the simplicity, something quiet was growing. Emma could feel it every time their eyes met. Every time his calm voice softened her day. One afternoon, she saw him outside, adjusting his camera near the apartment courtyard. She walked over, curious. "What are you taking pictures of?" He pointed toward a puddle reflecting the branches of a nearby tree. "That," he said, "the way light bends when it touches water. It's always changing, but still beautiful." Emma smiled. "You find beauty in things most people walk past." He turned the camera slightly toward her, meeting her eyes. "Maybe that's because most people don't stop long enough to look." Her breath caught, not from panic this time, but from something she couldn't quite name. The moment lingered, soft and unspoken. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed their conversations in her mind. She thought about how their lives had crossed by accident, but somehow felt intentional. She didn't know what this connection was becoming, and she didn't want to overthink it. All she knew was that Daniel had brought a calm she didn't know she needed. He hadn't just helped her breathe that night, he'd helped her remember how it felt to be alive, present, and quietly hopeful again. As she drifted to sleep, she realized that sometimes people enter your life not to change everything at once, but to help you find peace in the spaces you thought were empty. And Daniel, without even trying, had done exactly that. Days turned into weeks, and the strange, quiet bond between Emma and Daniel began to settle into something natural. What had started as a single moment of panic had somehow opened a door neither of them expected. They saw each other often now, sometimes by chance, sometimes by quiet intention. He'd bring her a coffee on his way back from his morning walks. and she'd drop by with a slice of banana bread or a note on his door that said, "Good luck with your shoot today." It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was simple, steady, and quietly warm. Emma felt lighter lately. Her anxiety hadn't vanished, but it didn't control her anymore. She'd learned to breathe through her days again, and often Daniel's presence helped her do just that. They talked about everything: books, dreams, fears, and even the small, silly things that make people laugh. He told her about growing up in a small town in Washington, how his mom taught him to see beauty in everything. She told him about losing her father years ago and how that loss had built invisible walls around her heart. Daniel never tried to fix her sadness. He simply listened. One evening, they met at a small cafe down the street. It was Daniel's idea. "You've been stuck inside too much," he'd said over text. "Come out. Let's get some Arandreal coffee, not the instant kind." She laughed and agreed. The cafe was quiet, warm, and smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. They sat by the window as rain streaked down the glass outside. Daniel was showing her pictures on his camera. "This one's from Cannon Beach," he said, scrolling through. The image showed a soft, golden sky meeting the edge of the sea. "I waited almost 2 hours for the light to hit just right." Emma studied the photo. "You make everything look peaceful," she said softly. "Even the ocean looks calm when you see it through your lens." He smiled, not at the compliment, but at her tone. Maybe peace is what we choose to see. Something about his words stayed with her. The rain outside made the world blur into shades of silver and gray. For a moment, she forgot about everything else: the noise, the loneliness, the past. It was just them, two souls quietly finding their way back to life. After that evening, their friendship deepened. They started walking together after dinner, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about things that mattered. One night, while walking through a park, Emma confessed something she hadn't told anyone before. "That night you came to my door," she said softly. "I wasn't just scared because I couldn't breathe. I was scared because I didn't think anyone would come." Daniel stopped walking. His expression softened. "But someone did," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." His voice was calm, but the weight of his words sank deep into her heart. They continued walking, both silent for a while. But the air between them felt full of meaning, of comfort, of something they didn't need to name. Over the next few days, Emma noticed something changing inside her. She looked forward to mornings again, to the sound of Daniel's knock, sharing small moments that made ordinary days special. He'd sometimes bring his camera and show her the world through his lens, the old bookstore around the corner, the reflection of trees and puddles, the golden light at sunset. Through him, she began to see beauty again in the simplest things. One Saturday afternoon, Emma invited him to her apartment for dinner. She'd cooked pasta and lit a small candle on the table, more out of nerves than romance. When Daniel arrived, he smiled at the sight. "You went all out," he teased. "I just didn't want to burn anything." She said, laughing. Dinner was easy, full of laughter and quiet moments. They talked about their favorite cities, dreams they still hadn't chased, and the strange comfort of starting over. At one point, the lights flickered as thunder rumbled outside. Emma looked at him. "I think the storm's moving in," she said. Daniel glanced toward the window. "Then let it. We've got food, candles, and company. That's all we need." Something about the way he said "we" made her chest tighten. They sat in the dim glow of the candlelight, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. It wasn't a romantic movie scene, it was real, imperfect, and somehow more beautiful that way. When he left that night, Emma walked him to the door. For a second, neither moved. The soft sound of rain filled the silence. He looked at her with a quiet warmth that said everything words couldn't. "Good night, Emma," he said softly. She smiled. "Good night, Daniel." After he left, she stood by the window, watching him disappear into the rain. Her heart felt strangeful, yet uneasy, calm, yet restless. She knew something had shifted, but she wasn't sure what it meant. She had promised herself not to fall for anyone again, not after the heartbreak she had endured years ago. Yet here she was, missing someone who lived just a few feet away. The next morning, she found another note under her door. It simply said, "Coffee later. Same place." She smiled and wrote back, "Only if you're buying this time." Their bond grew in quiet, gentle ways. They started sharing routines, morning walks on weekends, short texts during work hours, small check-ins that made life feel less heavy. Emma's friends noticed the change in her voice when she talked about the guy next door. She brushed it off, insisting they were just friends. But deep down, she knew it was something more. One evening, they went for a drive outside the city. Daniel wanted to show her a spot he called his thinking place. It was a small hill overlooking the river where the sunset turned the water into liquid gold. They sat on the hood of his car, sipping coffee from a thermos. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered. "Yeah," Daniel said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It reminds me that even when things fall apart, the sun still finds a way back every evening." His words carried a quiet ache. She knew there were stories behind them, stories he hadn't told yet. But she didn't ask. She just sat beside him, letting the moment speak for both of them. As the sky darkened, Daniel turned toward her. "Emma," he said slowly, "do you ever feel like the universe gives you a second chance when you least expect it?" She looked at him, her heart beating faster. "Maybe," she said softly, "but only if you're brave enough to take it." He smiled faintly, his eyes holding hers. For a second, it felt like the whole world went quiet. But before either of them could say more, a gust of wind broke the moment. They laughed, pretending the silence hadn't meant something deeper. That night, when she returned home, Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face in the fading sunset light. She didn't know what was happening between them, only that it felt real. In the days that followed, they continued as before, friendly, warm, careful. But beneath every smile, every glance, there was something unspoken. A quiet electricity they both felt, but neither dared to name. Emma didn't realize it then. But the calm days were leading up to something bigger, something that would test the connection they had built and reveal just how much Daniel truly cared. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes it's found in the quiet moments, in shared coffee cups, in laughter under the rain and in the calm before life decides to change everything again. It had been almost 2 months since the night Daniel first came to Emma's door. Their friendship had grown into something deep and comforting, like a quiet rhythm that made sense without effort. They weren't officially anything, but there was a closeness between them that didn't need a label. Emma had started smiling more, sleeping better, and even her panic attacks had faded. But life, as always, had its own timing. One cold Thursday evening, Emma came home after a routine doctor's visit. It was supposed to be a quick checkup, nothing serious. But when the nurse called her back to discuss her test results, her heart began to pound. The doctor said her results showed some irregularities and that more tests would be needed. It wasn't necessarily bad news, but it was enough to send Emma's thoughts spiraling. By the time she got home, her hands were shaking. The apartment felt too quiet, too heavy. The same tightness she once felt months ago began to creep back into her chest. She tried to distract her self-made tea, turned on the TV, scrolled through her phone, but nothing worked. Her breath grew short and fears started building again. The thought of being sick, of being alone, filled her head. She sat on the floor by the window, tears streaming down her face. It was happening again, the panic, the breathlessness, the helplessness. She whispered to herself, "Not again. Please, not again." Then, through the haze of fear, there was a knock. A soft, familiar knock. Emma froze, then wiped her face and opened the door. Daniel stood there, holding a small paper bag. "Hey," he said gently, noticing her trembling hands and red eyes. "I brought your favorite tea. You weren't answering your texts." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Daniel, I don't know what's wrong. The doctor called today. Something about my results." Her breath hitched again. Without a word, Daniel stepped forward and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let's sit down. One thing at a time." He led her to the couch just like he had that first night. He didn't try to talk her out of her fear or tell her to calm down. He simply sat beside her, his presence steady, like an anchor keeping her from drifting too far into panic. After a few moments, he handed her a cup of tea. "Drink slowly," he said. "You're safe. You're not alone." Emma took a sip, her breathing still uneven but improving. "I'm scared, Daniel," she admitted. "What if it's something serious?" What if he stopped her gently? "Then we'll face it together," he said. His tone was calm, certain. "But until we know, let's not fight shadows." Those words hit her harder than she expected. The panic began to soften, replaced by quiet tears. Daniel reached for her hand, not in a romantic way, but in a way that said, "I'm here." He didn't move, didn't rush to fill the silence. He just stayed beside her as the world slowed down again. After a long moment, she looked up at him. "Why are you always here when I fall apart?" He smiled faintly. "Because sometimes the right people show up when you need them most. I know what it feels like to fall apart and have no one there. I don't want that for you." His honesty made her heart ache in a new way. She realized he wasn't just being kind, he understood her. He had his own battles, his own quiet loneliness. They weren't saving each other. They were learning to stand together as the night went on. The storm inside her began to fade. They talked softly about everything and nothing about fear, about strength, about how strange life could be. Daniel shared how photography had helped him through dark times. How looking at light through a lens reminded him that even darkness could be beautiful. Emma listened, her heart slowly calming with every word. Later, they stood by the window, looking at the city lights shimmering in the cold air. The streets below glowed with reflections from passing cars, and the world seemed to hum softly around them. "Do you ever wonder," Emma asked, "why some people walk into your life at the exact moment you need them?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes kind. "Maybe it's not chance," he said. "Maybe it's life's way of giving us another breath when we forget how." She smiled, a quiet tear slipping down her cheek. He reached up and gently brushed it away, his fingers warm against her skin. "You're stronger than you think, Emma," he said. "You've already proved it." The warmth of his words filled her chest. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She simply looked at him, this man who had become her calm in every storm, and realized she didn't need to say thank you. He already knew. They stayed there a while longer, just watching the lights. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Emma didn't feel afraid anymore. Whatever came next, she knew she wasn't alone in facing it. A few weeks later, the doctor called again. Her results were normal, just a minor issue. Nothing serious. She laughed in relief, and the first person she texted was Daniel. He replied instantly. "Told you it would be fine. Tea to celebrate?" That evening, he came over with 2 mugs and his easy smile. They sat on the balcony, watching the sunset fade into soft gold. "So," he said playfully, "does this mean I can stop worrying every time you don't text back for 5 hours?" Emma laughed. No promises. They both smiled, and the moment felt light, natural like breathing. She realized something then. Love didn't always begin with fireworks or confessions. Sometimes it began quietly with someone knocking on your door when you needed them most. As the night deepened, Daniel stood to leave, but hesitated. "Emma," he said softly, "you know, you don't have to be strong all the time, right?" She looked up at him. "And you know, you don't have to carry everyone's weight either." They both smiled, understanding each other without saying more. When he left, she leaned against the door for a moment, listening to the sound of his footsteps fade down the hall. It felt bittersweet, yet comforting. Weeks later, their friendship blossomed into something deeper, quiet, patient, real. They never rushed into labels or promises. They just kept showing up day after day, breath after breath. Emma's panic attacks became rare, replaced by moments of laughter and quiet gratitude. Daniel continued his photography, often asking her to come along on his trips. She loved watching him work the way, his eyes lit up when the light hit just right. One evening, as they stood by a lake at sunset, Daniel handed her his camera. "Your turn," he said. "Capture something you want to remember." Emma lifted the camera and aimed it at him, framed against the orange sky. "Got it," she said, smiling. "What did you see?" he asked. "Peace," she whispered, "because that's what you've brought into my life." He didn't respond with words. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. That night, as they drove home, Emma looked out the window at the stars appearing in the sky. She thought about that first night she couldn't breathe, Kay, and how the same man who saved her then was still by her side, not to fix her, but to remind her how to breathe again. And maybe that was love, not grand or dramatic, but steady and true. The kind that doesn't demand attention but quietly changes everything. The kind that arrives when you least expect it and stays when you need it most. Because sometimes love isn't about promises or forever. It's about someone showing up over and over until breathing feels easy again.